All right, hands where I can see them. License and registration. Now.
What's the problem, officer?
None of your business. Just give me your paperwork.
I'm federal law enforcement. I can be verified through dispatcher or supervisor.
I don't care what you say you are. You're not leaving until I figure this out.
Then verify me the normal way. Call the supervisor.
All right.
This rookie deputy thought he was untouchable when he pulled over a black driver for no reason, but he made a fatal career mistake. He didn't realize he was harassing a federal Secret Service agent with the power to fight back. Watch how one man's ego triggered a massive federal investigation. Red and blue lights sat behind a dark SUV on the shoulder. Deputy Tyler Briggs was already running hot at the driver's window. New deputy, big voice, acting like the stop was his stage. Inside the SUV, Calvin Brooks kept it tight and professional. Hands visible. No sudden movement. No argument. He reported he was on official duty and provided identification like he'd done 100 times before. Briggs didn't treat it like routine. He demanded Brooks step out. He kept pushing even after Brooks showed federal credentials. He acted like the credentials were a challenge instead of information. Brooks didn't match the attitude. He stayed calm and repeated a simple request. Call a supervisor, document the stop, and confirm who he was through proper channels. Briggs refused. He didn't slow down. He didn't reset. He escalated. He started fishing for reasons out loud. Lane movement, suspicious behavior, vehicle in the area. The kind of vague talk that never matches the footage later. Brooks asked for the specific reason for the stop. Briggs didn't give a clean one. Quick pause. Where are you watching from? Drop your country or state in the comments. And if you like stories where ego meets paperwork and accountability wins, hit like and subscribe. Back to it. Brooks wasn't a random driver. He was a U.S. Secret Service special agent assigned out of a nearby field office. That night, he'd been in Redwood County on a routine advance related to an upcoming protective visit, low-profile vehicle, normal driving, no attention-seeking, just work. Briggs saw a black man in a nice SUV near a high-dollar exit and decided he was going to make a stop. Redwood County had corridors where deputies like to hunt. Lots of proactive traffic work. Lots of stops that somehow landed on the same kinds of drivers. Brooks pulled over clean and followed protocol because he could tell this wasn't about a traffic violation. It was about control. Briggs wanted submission. Brooks gave procedure. That's what set Briggs off. Brooks stayed respectful but firm. He requested a supervisor again. He reported that the deputy was interfering with a federal protective function. He asked Briggs to call it in and verify through dispatch. Briggs didn't like hearing federal on the side of his road. He treated it like the driver was trying to dodge him. So he did what bad stops always do next. He called for backup. 2 more units arrived and stacked behind his cruiser. More body cams, more witnesses. The scene got bigger, which is exactly what Briggs wanted. He wanted to look in control. A second deputy looked at Brooks's credentials longer than Briggs did. You could tell it clicked for him. He didn't take over, but he didn't look comfortable either. Briggs kept driving it. He repeated the order to step out. He talked over Brooks. He acted like the stop belonged to him, and nobody was allowed to change the plan. Brooks kept it clean. He asked for names and badge numbers. He noted unit identifiers. He stated the time. He stated the location. He stated he was notifying his field office. Then Brooks made the call. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a direct notification to the Secret Service field office that a county deputy had initiated a baseless stop, escalated after federal identification, and was interfering with an active protective-related assignment. That's when the whole stop changed. Because now this wasn't just a local deputy pressing a driver. This was a local deputy creating an interference report that would land on a federal desk with timestamps, body cam footage, and witnesses. And Briggs still didn't fully understand what he'd just triggered. Backup was already there, and that changed the deputy's posture. More units meant he could perform. He kept the stop active on purpose. He wanted it to look like he'd found something serious. Brooks didn't give him anything. No arguing, no long explanations. He stuck to the same points. He was federal. He was on assignment tied to a protective advance, and he needed a supervisor and proper verification. Briggs kept trying to force a different outcome. He repeated the order to exit the vehicle. He treated Brooks's calm tone like defiance. He tried to make Brooks choose between compliance and escalation. Then the supervisor arrived. Sergeant Linda Carver pulled up and stepped into the cluster of cruisers. She didn't rush. She didn't yell. She looked at Brooks's vehicle, looked at the stacked units, then looked straight at Briggs like she already knew the stop was going to be a problem. Briggs tried to brief her fast. He didn't have one clean reason for the stop. He gave a pile of reasons. He kept it vague. The story shifted mid-sentence like he was building it while he talked. Carver didn't buy it. She asked for the actual violation. Briggs didn't answer cleanly. He went back to suspicious and didn't look right. Carver walked closer to the driver's window, stayed outside the immediate space, and asked Brooks for identification. Brooks provided it again, controlled and simple. Carver saw the credentials and immediately moved into damage control mode. Not because she suddenly cared about Brooks's rights, because she understood jurisdiction. And she understood what it meant if a deputy escalated after being shown federal credentials. Carver told Briggs to step back and calm down. Briggs didn't want to. He didn't want to lose control in front of other deputies. He kept pushing his version of the stop like it was a test of authority. Brooks stayed focused. He told Carver he'd already notified his field office. He reported the time the stop started. He reported that the deputy continued escalating after federal identification. He reported that this was interference with federal duties. Carver's next move showed exactly how departments try to survive these moments. She tried to end it quietly. She told Brooks he'd be free to go once everything is confirmed. She suggested it was just a misunderstanding. She acted like the solution was to wrap it up before it became a report. Brooks didn't accept that. He didn't get loud. He didn't threaten anyone. He didn't insult the department. He simply refused to let it become an off-the-books event. He stated that it needed to be documented. He stated he wanted the stop recorded as initiated without a valid violation. He stated he wanted the names and badge numbers of everyone on scene. That's the part officers hate. Not because it's wrong, because it removes their ability to rewrite later. While Carver tried to smooth it out, Brooks's phone was already active. The Secret Service field office supervisor on the other end didn't care about local misunderstandings. She cared about interference. She asked for the location. She asked for the deputy's name. She asked for the supervisor's name. She asked for the incident number. She asked whether Brooks had been detained or ordered out after presenting credentials. Brooks answered each point. Carver could hear enough to understand what was coming next. She tried one more time to steer it into a quiet release. She told Briggs to end the stop. Briggs still tried to salvage it. He pushed for a citation. He pushed for a search. He pushed for something that made the stop look justified. Carver shut it down. She ordered the stop terminated. Brooks was released. No ticket, no warning. No apology, just an awkward, "you're free to go" vibe that didn't match the way the stop started. But the real damage was already done. Because now the Secret Service had an interference report in motion with timestamps, unit identifiers, and multiple body cams. Brooks had names. Brooks had a witness filming from across the road. Brooks had a supervisor present who heard the federal notification. And Carver had something else. A rookie deputy who didn't just make a bad stop. He forced the entire department into a position where federal agencies could demand records. Brooks drove off and didn't celebrate. That's not how people like him operate. He treated it like a security incident and started documenting while it was still fresh. Meanwhile, back at the scene, Carver pulled Briggs aside. It wasn't a pep talk. It was a warning. Because once federal attention locks on, it doesn't stop at one traffic stop. It goes looking for patterns, and Redwood County had years of patterns. The next morning, Redwood County tried to act like nothing happened. They didn't call Brooks to apologize. They didn't open with accountability. They opened with containment. A lieutenant contacted Carver and asked for a summary for the file, not a full report request. A summary. That's how you keep things flexible. Carver didn't have that luxury. The Secret Service already had an interference notification logged. That meant federal documentation existed before the county wrote a single sentence. Hard timestamps, names, units, a paper trail the county couldn't edit. And Brooks didn't just notify. He followed through. He sent a formal incident package to his field office. Location, sequence, officer names, supervisor presence, the escalation after credentials, and the release without any citation. Clean and factual. No emotion. That style hits harder than anger because it reads like an operational problem, not a personal complaint. Within 48 hours, Redwood County got the first request, not a friendly one. It asked for Bodycam from every deputy on scene. Dashcam, CAD logs, radio traffic. The deputy's stop narrative, the supervisor's narrative, unit GPS history, and the stop data for that corridor going back months. That last part is where departments start sweating, because one bad stop is a mistake. A pattern is policy. Redwood County's command staff held an internal meeting and did what too many departments do. They tried to isolate the rookie as a one-off. They framed Briggs as inexperienced. They hinted communication issues. They acted like the solution was extra training and a quiet write-up. Then internal affairs got involved, and the tone changed again. IA investigator Raul Mendoza wasn't brought in because leadership wanted truth. He was brought in because leadership needed someone to say, they looked into it. Mendoza had seen that play before. He pulled the body cam first. It showed what Brooks described. The deputy initiated a stop with no clear violation. The deputy escalated after federal identification. The deputy kept stacking vague reasons instead of one factual reason. The supervisor arrived and ended the stop without a citation. Mendoza didn't stop there. He never stopped at this incident. He requested Briggs's prior stop reports. Not just the last week, the last several months. He pulled the wording patterns. He pulled the common phrases. He pulled who got searched. He pulled who got ordered out. He pulled who got consent requests. He pulled who got warnings and who got paperwork. It didn't take long. Briggs' stops leaned hard in one direction. Same type of driver. Same quarters. Same foggy justifications. Same escalation pattern when people asked basic questions. Mendoza then did the thing departments fear. He compared Briggs to the unit culture around him. Because rookies don't invent patterns alone, they copy what gets rewarded. He pulled training records, de-escalation refreshers that were supposed to happen yearly, missing for entire squads. Constitutional policing modules, completed on paper, not in practice. Complaint handling, repeated not sustained outcomes with thin documentation. Then he pulled citizen complaints and internal notes. And that's where the rot showed itself. The county had been collecting complaints about racial profiling for years. The complaints didn't disappear. They just got managed. Same language in the closures. Same vague findings. Same supervisors signing off. No corrective action. No monitoring. No meaningful retraining. No policy updates. Mendoza found an internal list of hot areas where deputies were encouraged to be proactive. It wasn't written as a racist document. It didn't need to be. It was geography coded as suspicion. The exit near the resort. The road by the gated communities. The stretch that fed into older black neighborhoods. Stop volume wasn't the only thing that spiked there. Search rates spiked. Order to exit rates spiked. Consent requests spiked. And the hit rate didn't match the aggression. Lots of intrusion, not much contraband. That's a classic profiling footprint. Then a deputy talked. Not at first, not proudly. Evan Cole had been around long enough to know what the department did when heat came in. They protected the top and sacrificed the bottom. He saw how quickly leadership started positioning Briggs as the lone problem, even though the corridor tactics were older than Briggs's academy graduation. Cole sat with Mendoza and confirmed what the stats already hinted. Briggs wasn't acting alone. He was acting like a deputy trying to fit in. He'd been encouraged to make stops. He'd been praised for being aggressive. He'd been told the corridor was where the work is. He'd been taught which drivers needed checking without anyone saying it out loud. And now a federal agent had been the one to trigger the alarm. That's what made this different. A local resident complaint could be ignored. A federal interference report couldn't. That's when the Department of Justice stepped in. The U.S. Attorney's Office requested materials. Department of Justice Civil Rights asked for broader data sets, not just Briggs. Stop demographics, search demographics, use of force reports tied to traffic stops, complaint records, training compliance, supervisory review practices. Department of Justice didn't care about Redwood County's feelings. Department of Justice cared about whether the department ran a pattern of unconstitutional policing. And the more Redwood County tried to limit the scope, the more it looked like concealment. Mendoza completed his internal findings and sent them up. The conclusion was simple. Briggs made the stop. Briggs escalated it. But the department's training gaps, supervision failures, and long-standing stop patterns set the stage. That's the part leadership couldn't talk their way out of. Because once you prove leadership knew about repeated complaints and did nothing, the case stops being about one deputy. It becomes deliberate indifference. And deliberate indifference is how you get federal oversight, massive civil exposure, and years of records dragged into court. By the end of that week, Redwood County wasn't asking, how do we discipline Briggs? They were asking, how far back are they going to look? Redwood County tried to end it fast. They fired Deputy Tyler Briggs within 2 weeks and pushed a statement that made him sound like the only problem. Rookie mistake. Failure to follow procedure. Corrective action taken. They wanted the headline to be simple. Department of Justice didn't accept simple because the federal request didn't stop at Briggs. They widened. They pulled 5 years of stop data, then 10. They asked for every complaint tagged profiling, traffic stop, search, attitude, failure to identify reason, even when the department had closed them as not sustained. They also pulled internal emails and supervisor notes. That's where departments get hurt. Numbers show patterns. Messages show intent. And the pattern was clear. Stops clustered in specific corridors, same neighborhoods, same exits, same demographics taking the hit. The searches didn't line up with results. High intrusion, low discovery, that's not good police work. That's harassment dressed up as enforcement. Then came the training and supervision failures. The department claimed it had policies. Department of Justice and IA looked at what actually happened. Missing refreshers. No meaningful audits. Supervisors signing off on vague narratives. Complaint outcomes that repeated the same language like a rubber stamp. Redwood County's shield wasn't just the badge. It was the routine. Deny, close, move on. The Secret Service interference report broke that routine. Because Agent Calvin Brooks didn't just complain. He documented. He stayed controlled. He put the event into federal channels with timestamps and names, while the stop was still fresh. That forced Redwood County into a fight on a field they didn't control. Civil lawsuits came next. Not just Brooks's case. Other drivers came forward after the news hit local groups and social feeds. People who'd been stopped in the same corridor. People who remembered the same vague reasons and the same pressure tactics. People who didn't have credentials, didn't have cameras, and didn't have anyone listening back then. The county's legal strategy cracked in public. They tried to lean on qualified immunity and routine defenses. Plaintiffs' attorneys didn't treat it like a one-off incident. They argued pattern. They argued supervision failure. They argued deliberate indifference. They pointed at ignored complaints and missing corrective action. And the county couldn't hide behind, "We didn't know." Internal Affairs had records showing they did know. Financial pressure hit fast. Insurance carriers started asking questions. Settlements became real numbers. The county board started arguing in meetings about budgets instead of optics. That's when accountability becomes unavoidable, when it costs. Department of Justice pushed for structural changes. They demanded policy updates with enforcement teeth, real stop documentation standards, required articulation of cause, mandatory supervisor review for searches and prolonged detentions, Bodycam compliance auditing, complaint intake reforms, anti-bias training that wasn't a checkbox, early warning tracking for deputies with repeated stop complaints. The department fought it at first, then they realized the alternative was worse. Federal oversight meant monitoring, reporting, and consequences if they didn't comply. No more quiet closures, no more not sustained without real analysis, no more hiding patterns behind paperwork. Command staff tried to protect themselves. Some blamed the rookie, some blamed the climate, some blamed misunderstandings. Department of Justice kept dragging it back to one question: why did this keep happening with no correction? That's how a rookie's ego dismantled a whole department's comfort. Because Briggs wasn't some mastermind. He was a symptom. He acted like he'd been taught. He acted like he'd seen others act. He just did it to the wrong person on the wrong night with too many cameras running. Brooks's personal outcome stayed straightforward. He didn't do interviews for attention. He didn't tour the story. He did what professionals do. He cooperated with investigators. He provided documentation. He answered questions. He let the process do the work. He also made one thing clear in his statements. He wasn't asking for special treatment because he was federal. He was pointing out that the stop should never have happened to anyone. That line mattered. It made the case bigger than him. In the end, Briggs lost his job and his certification process got reviewed. The department faced federal oversight and civil exposure that reached way beyond one stop. Supervisors got disciplined for failures to review, failures to correct, failures to document. The sheriff's office had to rebuild policies under pressure instead of choice. And the public finally saw what people in that county had been saying for years. One deputy's arrogance didn't just ruin his own career. It pulled the curtain back on a whole system that depended on nobody pushing back with evidence. So here's the question for you. If you were in that driver's seat, would you have stayed calm and recorded everything? Or would you have tried to argue your way out and made it worse? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories where accountability actually lands, subscribe to the channel.
All right, what's your name? What are you doing
Sir,
over
what
here?
happened? Why are you asking?
You seem suspicious. That's enough for me to talk to you.
Talking is fine, but there is no legal reason for demanding my personal information.
If you keep playing games, I can take you to jail for obstruction.
This officer thought he found an easy target, but he just committed professional suicide. He didn't realize the man he was illegally detaining was a high-profile civil rights attorney who knew the law better than the chief of police. Watch the exact second his ego shattered when he finally understood his career was over. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or state in the comments. And if you like stories where cameras and the law expose bad policing, hit like and subscribe. Now back to it. Officer Travis Rourke already had Marcus Bennett in a detention outside a parking structure near the courthouse district. Close enough to box him in, loud enough to perform authority, confident enough to assume nobody would challenge him. Marcus didn't move much, hands visible, body still. He kept his voice controlled because he knew the game. If Rourke could trigger a reaction, he'd label it as resistance and turn the whole encounter into a justification. Marcus asked if he was being detained, and what specific crime Rourke suspected. Straight to the point. Rourke didn't give a clear reason. He went with vague, suspicious talk and kept issuing commands like that alone was a legal basis. Marcus didn't argue emotions. He started building a record. He stated that he didn't consent to any search. He stated that Rourke had not articulated reasonable suspicion. He stated that he would comply with lawful orders while not answering investigative questions beyond what the law required. That's when Rourke's tone changed. He stepped closer, got sharper, tried to make Marcus feel small. He started hinting at arrest, using obstruction-style language. Without any real obstruction happening, it was pressure. That's all it was. Marcus stayed steady and kept documenting out loud for the camera. He framed what was happening as a Fourth Amendment seizure. He noted that extending a detention without a stated basis creates liability. He kept his words clean and specific because later this would matter more than anything Rourke was saying. Marcus then asked for Rourke's name and badge number. Rourke refused. That refusal wasn't a minor detail. It's the kind of decision that turns a bad stop into a deliberate one. And it's the kind of thing departments hate seeing on video because there's no innocent explanation for it. Marcus stated that the refusal to identify would be included in a formal complaint and any legal action that followed. No threats, just a fact. Here's what Rourke didn't understand yet. Marcus Bennett wasn't a random citizen trying to talk his way out. He was a civil rights attorney with a track record, the kind of attorney who sues departments for unlawful stops and retaliatory threats, the kind of attorney who knows exactly how these encounters get defended in court and how to cut those defenses off at the knees in real time. Marcus had been in the courthouse area for work, routine, normal day. Rourke didn't have a dispatch call, no matching suspect description, no report from a business owner, no victim pointing anyone out. He made the stop off a look and a feeling, then tried to force it into legality through dominance. He kept pushing for information Marcus didn't have to give. He hovered near Marcus's pockets and personal items like he wanted consent without asking for it. Marcus shut that down. He repeated that he didn't consent. He repeated that Rourke needed a lawful basis to continue. Short sentences, clear boundaries. Then Rourke made the mistake that changed everything. He moved toward Marcus's wallet area like he could just take control of Marcus's property and call it procedure. Marcus didn't yank away or make sudden moves. He stayed still and stated clearly that any seizure or search without probable cause or consent would be unlawful under the Fourth Amendment. He said it so the Bodycam would catch it. He said it so any reviewer would hear exactly what was being challenged. Rourke paused. Just a fraction. His confidence didn't disappear, but it cracked. Because now he was dealing with someone who wasn't guessing, wasn't scared, and wasn't speaking in generalities. Marcus told him he would provide whatever identification the law required, but he would not answer investigative questions and would not consent to searches. Then Marcus mentioned he had professional credentials on him. Rourke brushed it off and kept posturing, but his rhythm was already changing. Rourke finally asked for Marcus's identification in a way that wasn't normal procedure. It wasn't calm. It was a power move. He wanted something he could hold over Marcus, something he could use to keep the stop alive. Marcus moved slow and deliberate, the way you do when an officer's already looking for a reason to claim sudden movement. He didn't hand over his whole wallet. He pulled out what he intended to show and kept his hands visible the entire time. That's when the body cam caught the shift. Rourke looked at the card. He looked again. You could see the mental recalculation happen. His face tightened, his shoulders dropped a little, and his voice changed. Not softer out of respect, softer out of worry. Because it wasn't just a name. It was a credential tied to a civil rights law firm. Bar information. Professional ID that made one thing obvious. This wasn't going to end with Marcus going home frustrated. This was going to end with paperwork, subpoenas, and depositions. Rourke tried to recover control fast. He started talking like the encounter had always been routine. He tried to backfill justification with vague, checking things out language. He kept the same stance, but the aggression drained out of it. The intimidation didn't hit the same anymore because now it looked like what it was: posturing without cause. Marcus didn't press emotionally, he pressed procedurally. He restated that he was being detained without reasonable suspicion. He restated that Rourke had refused to identify himself. He restated that he did not consent to any search. He made sure the camera had it all in one clean sequence, like he was organizing evidence in real time. Rourke then made his second major mistake. Instead of ending it, he escalated again. He leaned on the "I can arrest you" angle, trying to force Marcus into compliance through fear. He implied obstruction again. He implied failure to cooperate. He kept fishing for something he could write down later to justify the stop. Marcus didn't give him anything. He didn't argue side issues. He didn't debate attitudes. He kept it tight. He asked for a supervisor, and Rourke resisted the idea at first. You could tell he didn't want someone else stepping into a scene he'd already contaminated. He wanted to control the narrative alone. Marcus stayed on the request. Supervisor. Now. A few minutes later, Sergeant Lila Grant arrived. Not rushing in like a hero, just walking into a mess and immediately reading the body language. Grant looked at Marcus first. Calm, still, hands visible. Then she looked at Rourke. Tight jaw, defensive stance, over-explaining before she even asked. Grant asked what the reasonable suspicion was. She didn't ask for vibes. She asked for the legal basis. Rourke gave a messy answer. He tried to frame it as suspicious behavior. Then he tried to frame it as matching something. Then he tried to frame it as refusing to answer. He bounced between reasons because none of them were solid, and every change made it worse. Grant asked if there was a call for service. There wasn't. Grant asked if there was a description from dispatch. There wasn't. Grant asked what specific crime he suspected at the time he initiated the stop. Rourke didn't have one that held up. Marcus took that opening and locked the record in. He stated that he had asked multiple times if he was being detained and for what crime, and Rourke never articulated reasonable suspicion. He stated that Rourke refused to provide name and badge number. He stated that Rourke threatened arrest, while refusing to provide a legal basis. He stated that the detention had extended beyond any permissible brief inquiry. Grant didn't look happy, not at Marcus, at the situation. She asked Rourke again for his identifying information to be provided. Rourke hesitated. Then he gave it, but it sounded forced, like someone complying with a demand he couldn't dodge anymore. Marcus requested an incident number or call reference. He requested confirmation that Bodycam was active and would be preserved. He requested that any footage from nearby city cameras be retained as well. That last part mattered, because it told everyone on scene Marcus knew how evidence disappears when nobody asks early. Grant then did the thing Rourke should have done at the start. She ended the detention. No apology from Rourke. No accountability in the moment. Just an attempt to leave before the damage fully registered. Marcus didn't chase him. He didn't gloat. He didn't need to. He finished with one clear line that landed because it was accurate. He told them Rourke didn't stop a suspect. He created a liability. Grant separated the scene, released Marcus, and pulled Rourke aside. Not for a quiet coaching moment. For containment. Because now there was a supervisor who had heard the lack of reasonable suspicion with her own ears. A supervisor who had seen the refusal to identify. A supervisor who knew this wasn't defensible. And within hours, the second camera hit the internet. A local resident, Jenna Ortiz, had filmed from her porch when she heard the tone. Her clip showed the posture, the crowd spacing, the officer's proximity, and the moment the whole vibe shifted after Marcus's credential came out. By the time the department understood what was circulating, people weren't asking, "What happened?" They were asking, "What are you going to do about it?" The department tried to get ahead of it that night, not with accountability, with damage control. A watch commander flagged the porch video within hours because it was already picking up traction locally. Then the Bodycam request hit. Then people started tagging the department and the city. The clip didn't need context. You could see the posture and hear the escalation pattern. You could see that the reason came after the control. By the next morning, Internal Affairs didn't treat it like a routine complaint. IA opened a formal investigation immediately. They pulled Rourke's body cam, the supervisor's body cam, and whatever street and garage cameras were in range. They logged it. They locked it down. No, we'll review it when we can. They knew what this was, because the problem wasn't one rude officer. It was how clean the violation looked. Marcus didn't wait around either. He did what he always did. He built the case while the adrenaline was still fresh and the timeline was still easy to prove. He documented the time and location. He documented the duration of the detention. He documented the requests he made for reasonable suspicion, identification, and supervisor response. He documented the refusal to provide badge information until a supervisor arrived. He documented the threats of arrest tied to his questions. He also sent preservation notices fast, not dramatic, practical. Preserve body cam, preserve dispatch logs, preserve CAD entries, preserve any city camera footage, preserve disciplinary history for the officer, preserve training records. That's how you stop the usual game where evidence can't be located 3 weeks later. By day 2, the city attorney's office was in the loop. They weren't thinking about feelings. They were thinking about exposure. Qualified immunity depends on a department being able to argue the officer's actions were reasonable under clearly established law. This wasn't gray. This wasn't split-second decision. This was an officer initiating a detention without articulable reasonable suspicion, escalating with threats, refusing to identify, and trying to turn basic questioning into a reason to arrest. That's the kind of set of facts that gets officers personally named in federal complaints. That's the kind of set of facts that turns a city into a checkbook. IA interviewed Sergeant Grant early. That mattered, because she arrived, asked for the legal basis, and got nothing usable. Her statements were going to match the video. No wiggle room. Then Internal Affairs interviewed Rourke. He tried the usual script. Officer safety, suspicious behavior, non-compliance. I was conducting an investigation. He tried to stack vague terms on top of each other until it sounded like procedure. Internal Affairs didn't accept it. They compared his words to the video and the timestamps. They compared his claimed reason to the lack of a call. They compared his escalation to Marcus's calm behavior. They compared his refusal to identify to policy. They compared the threats to training standards. Then, they pulled his history. Not because they needed it to prove this incident. They didn't. They pulled it because this kind of behavior rarely shows up for the first time on a day with multiple cameras. Within a week, the department took an unusual step. They didn't place him on the standard administrative leave cycle and let it sit. They removed him from duty and moved straight into termination proceedings. Fast. That speed tells you how bad the footage was. Departments don't move quickly unless they feel trapped by evidence. The termination packet hit multiple violations at once, and it wasn't vague. Unlawful detention without articulable reasonable suspicion, escalation inconsistent with de-escalation and professionalism policy, threatening arrest without probable cause and using arrest threats to compel speech, failure to identify properly when requested, and refusal to provide badge information until forced. Conduct unbecoming, including antagonistic posture and tone that escalated the encounter. Body cam conduct issues connected to proximity and scene management, creating an appearance of intentional intimidation. Marcus's lawyers also framed it under federal civil rights exposure, Fourth Amendment seizure, retaliation angle, pattern evidence if applicable. The exact language depends on the filing, but the structure was clear. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a violation with documentation. Rourke tried to save himself through the union. He asked for the usual slow process. He pushed for reassignment. He pushed for counseling and retraining. He pushed for anything that didn't end in a firing. The department didn't bite because they didn't just see a complaint. They saw a future deposition where a lawyer plays the body cam and asks the chief why this officer was still employed after that footage existed. And then came the move that really ended him. The department forwarded the case to the state's peace officer standards body for decertification review. That's the gatekeeping layer. If they pull certification, you can't just hop to the next town and start over. That process isn't instant, but the recommendation itself is a public signal. The department believes this officer should never work as a cop again. Meanwhile, the public side got louder. Local advocates started requesting stop data and complaint data. Reporters asked for prior discipline. Community members posted their own stories. The department's social media comments turned into a scoreboard, and Marcus stayed quiet publicly. That's how you know it's serious. When a civil rights attorney doesn't perform for the internet, it usually means he's letting the filing speak. By the time the termination became official, the question wasn't whether Rourke messed up. It was how the department ever let him work the street like that in the first place. By the time the city tried to calm everyone down, it was already too late. The video had done what statements can't do. It showed the sequence. It showed the control first and the justification later. It showed an officer trying to create a reason while a calm citizen kept asking for the one thing that matters, lawful grounds. And Marcus didn't let it drag out. He filed fast. Clean timeline, clear allegations. Fourth Amendment unlawful detention. Retaliatory threats tied to protected speech. Policy failures shown on camera. Supervisor confirmation that no real basis existed. Multiple angles of footage. Preservation notices already sent. Dispatch and CAD logs already requested. The city attorney's office reviewed it and saw the same problem IA saw. They weren't defending a close call. They were defending a recorded violation. So they moved into settlement posture early. Not because they wanted to do the right thing, because trial discovery would be worse. Depositions would be worse. A jury would see the same body cam the public saw. And Marcus was the exact person who'd know how to make that footage look even worse in court. That's why the settlement got finalized this week. It was big. Not just because Marcus was a high-profile attorney, but because the evidence was strong and the city's defenses were weak. The agreement covered damages for the unlawful detention, attorney's fees, and additional compensation tied to the retaliatory threats and the refusal to identify. It also included non-monetary terms the city didn't want to negotiate in public, but couldn't avoid. Because Marcus didn't just want money, he wanted systems to change in writing. Now let's talk about what happened to Rourke. The department didn't get to hide behind training issue. They fired him. That part was already done. The next step was certification. The state standards board reviewed the referral, the internal findings, and the video. The key issue wasn't that he was rude. It was that he used police authority without lawful grounds, escalated when challenged, and refused basic identification while threatening arrest without probable cause. That's exactly the kind of conduct that certification systems are supposed to block. The result, Rourke lost his peace officer certification. No lateral transfer. No fresh start in the next county. No slipping into a smaller department that doesn't ask questions decently. Without certification, he couldn't legally serve as a sworn officer anywhere in that state. And most agencies won't touch someone with that record, even where transfers are technically possible. Career over, on paper. The department also got hit where it hurts. Policy and oversight. The settlement forced reforms that weren't optional and weren't, "we'll look into it." Here's what changed because of this case. Mandatory de-escalation training for the entire force, with specific modules on lawful detention standards, not just communication. Clear stop and detain guidance, requiring officers to articulate reasonable suspicion early and document it accurately, with supervisor review triggers when detentions exceed a set time. Badge and identification compliance requirements, including discipline if an officer refuses to identify when requested during a detention. Bodycam, compliance auditing, not just body cam on, but reviewing positioning, activation timing, and whether officers are intentionally obstructing footage or manipulating the record. Supervisory response standards, meaning if a citizen requests a supervisor during a detention, it gets treated as an accountability request, not an inconvenience. Early evidence preservation protocols, because Marcus made it obvious how quickly footage goes missing when nobody locks it down immediately. And the biggest shift wasn't even the policies. It was the internal culture shock. Because officers watching that footage learned something whether they wanted to or not. You can't bluff the Constitution on camera. Not anymore. Not when the person you're stopping knows how to build a case in real time and the public knows what it's looking at. Marcus didn't do a press tour. He didn't need to. He let the results speak. Fired officer, decertified officer, settlement check, policy reforms, mandatory training, supervisor accountability, a department forced to write down rules they used to treat as suggestions. And here's the lesson that landed hardest. Technology doesn't create justice by itself. A camera alone won't stop a bad stop. What balances the scale is the mix: recording plus knowledge, oversight plus documentation, calm plus precision. That's why this officer's ego didn't just get bruised, it got audited. Now I want to know what you would have done. Would you have stayed calm like Marcus did? Would you have asked for a supervisor? Would you have started documenting out loud for the camera? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more stories where accountability wins and the truth gets preserved in real time, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the like button. It helps us keep bringing these cases to your feed.
Ma'am, I need your ID.
Sir, explain to me what's the reason you stopped me.
It's a welfare check. I need to know who you are.
I did nothing wrong, so you have no legal reason for demanding my ID.
Your vehicle matches something we're looking at.
Matches what call, what description, what incident?
Ma'am, this can go a different direction if you keep pushing.
This cop thought he was teaching a lesson to a random citizen, but he was actually walking into a legal nightmare. He came in hot, like he expected instant compliance. Then you could see it. His whole approach changed the moment he realized the woman he was pressing for ID wasn't just anyone. He demanded her identification. He wasn't prepared for her authority. Tell me where you're watching from, state or country, in the comments. And if you like stories where people stay calm, know the law, and make misconduct expensive, hit like and subscribe. These encounters happen fast. Being ready matters. Now rewind. Avery Cole pulled into a legal street parking spot near a small downtown park. Midday, people walking by, a couple benches, nothing isolated. She wasn't blocking a driveway, no fire lane, no illegal tint issues. She shut the car off and stayed inside for a few minutes, working on her phone before a meeting across the street. A patrol car rolled past slow. The officer's head turned towards her vehicle. The patrol car kept going, then looped back. Officer Grant Holloway parked behind Avery at an angle that wasn't friendly, not fully blocking her, but close enough to signal pressure. He got out right away and walked up with a fast pace and a hard posture. He didn't start with a greeting. He started with a demand for identification. Avery didn't start digging around the car. She kept her hands visible. She lowered the window slightly, enough to speak. She asked what the reason was. Specifically, what crime he suspected. Holloway didn't give a specific crime. He said the area had issues. He referenced complaints. He said she'd been sitting there too long. He repeated that he needed her ID. Avery kept her voice even. She asked if she was being detained or if this was a voluntary contact. Holloway didn't answer that directly. He repeated the demand and framed it like it was non-negotiable. He acted like refusing ID was automatically suspicious. Avery asked again if she was free to leave. Holloway changed the reason. He called it a welfare check. He said he needed to make sure she was okay, but he still kept the same demand-first approach. No, are you all right? No, do you need help? Just ID. Avery asked, what about if her looked distressed or in danger? She was parked legally in daylight, sitting upright, phone in hand. Holloway shifted again. He said the vehicle matched a description. He didn't say what description. He didn't say what incident. He didn't give a time or a direction of travel. He stayed vague, then repeated the ID demand like the vagueness was enough. Avery didn't argue the whole world. She narrowed it back down to the law. She asked what the specific reasonable suspicion was and whether she was being detained. A woman walking a dog slowed down on the sidewalk. She looked at the officer's stance at the window and pulled out her phone. She started recording from a few yards away. Holloway noticed the phone. He didn't step away. He kept going. He tried to pull Avery into small talk questions that weren't small talk. Where she was coming from. Where she was headed. Why she was parked there. How long she'd been sitting. Each question had the same pressure behind it. Answer so he can justify the stop after. Avery didn't volunteer extra. She stated the basics. She was parked legally. She wasn't committing a crime. She repeated the question that matters. Detained or free to go? Holloway raised his voice slightly and repeated the ID demand again. He hinted at escalation. He hinted at calling backup. He framed her calm questions as making it difficult. Avery asked for his name and badge number. He gave it. She repeated it clearly so it would be captured on the recording. Then she requested his supervisor. Holloway pushed back. He said it wasn't needed. He said he could handle it. He stayed at the window, trying to keep control of the moment. Avery didn't move off it. She requested the supervisor again. Holloway started talking about people sitting in cars and what that usually means in that area. He didn't tie it to a specific report. He didn't tie it to her behavior beyond being parked. He returned to the same demand. ID. Avery gave one more clean line. If he was detaining her, he needed to state the legal basis. If he wasn't detaining her, she wasn't required to provide ID. Holloway responded by repeating the demand again. Avery waited until the pattern was clear on camera. Then she identified herself. She gave her name and her title, the district attorney for the county. You could see the shift right away. His voice changed. His posture changed. His wording changed. The demand turned into justification. The command tone turned into professional tone. He started talking like it was routine and harmless. Avery didn't match his energy. She kept hers the same. She repeated the request for a supervisor. She told him she wanted the interaction documented and the body camera preserved. Holloway stepped back from the window. The bystander kept recording. Avery stayed parked, calm, still. No shouting, no drama. Just a legal boundary drawn in plain language. Avery had said who she was. District attorney. The phone on the sidewalk kept recording. Officer Holloway stayed near the driver window, but his approach changed. Less command, more explanation. He started talking like the whole thing was routine. Avery didn't argue tone. She forced clarity. She asked one question and kept returning to it. Was she being detained? Holloway didn't give a clean yes or no. He tried to keep it in the gray zone. He kept asking for ID while avoiding the word detained. That's a common move. If he says it's voluntary, she can refuse and leave. If he says it's a detention, he needs legal grounds. Avery tightened the lane again. She said she was parked legally. She said she hadn't committed a crime. She asked him to state the specific reasonable suspicion for a detention, not the area, not complaints. A specific suspected offense tied to specific facts. Holloway offered a new reason. He referenced a description again, still vague. Avery asked what description from which call and what the reported crime was. She asked whether dispatch had broadcast anything matching her vehicle. She asked whether he ran her plate before approaching and what that return showed. Holloway avoided details and repeated the ID demand. Avery didn't raise her voice. She gave structure. She described the difference between a consensual contact and a detention in plain terms. She said he could talk to her voluntarily, but he couldn't order her to identify herself without lawful grounds. She said if he believed a crime was happening, he needed to say which crime and why. Holloway tried a pressure tactic. He framed her refusal as non-compliance. He warned her that refusing to identify could go bad. He hinted at calling more units. He said he was trying to keep it simple. Avery didn't mirror that. She asked for his supervisor again. Holloway resisted that too. He said it wasn't necessary. He said he was handling it. He tried to keep the conversation between the two of them. The bystander's camera stayed up. No yelling, no interference, just a clear record. Avery asked if his body camera was on. Holloway said it was. Avery then said she wanted the supervisor to respond to the scene, and she wanted all footage preserved. She said she was requesting it as a formal matter. That moved it from random stop to paper trail. Holloway tried another pivot. He said he was doing a welfare check. Avery asked what indicators triggered it. He didn't point to anything concrete. Avery repeated, if there was no specific reason to believe she needed assistance, then it wasn't a welfare check. It was an investigation without a stated crime. Holloway repeated the ID demand again. Avery responded by repeating the legal fork again. Either she was detained with reasonable suspicion stated on the record, or she was free to leave and didn't have to provide ID. He didn't answer directly. He changed the subject to her attitude. He said she was being difficult. He referenced cooperation, like it was a legal requirement. Avery kept it short and controlled. She said she was cooperating with lawful instructions. She said she wasn't required to surrender rights to make an officer comfortable. She asked for the supervisor again. Holloway finally stepped away a few feet and used his radio. While he did that, Avery stayed still, hands visible, no sudden movements, no searching for documents. She didn't give him a reason to claim furtive anything. The bystander kept recording from the sidewalk, capturing the patrol car angle, the officer position, and the fact Avery was simply parked. A few minutes later, a second patrol unit arrived, then a supervisor vehicle behind that. Sergeant Lena Park stepped out and walked up with a different posture, less performance, more assessment. She looked at Avery's car, then at Holloway, then at the bystander recording. Sergeant Park asked what the stop was for. Holloway tried to summarize it as a check. He referenced the area again. He referenced the description again. He said Avery refused to identify. Sergeant Park then asked the same key question Avery had been asking. What specific reasonable suspicion did he have that Avery had committed, was committing, or was about to commit a crime? Holloway didn't give a clean answer. He stayed general. Avery spoke to the supervisor the same way she'd spoken to Holloway. No insults, no heat. She stated she was parked legally. She stated the officer demanded ID without stating a crime. She stated she asked multiple times if she was detained and didn't receive a clear response. She stated she wanted the encounter documented and she wanted Bodycam and dispatch records preserved. Sergeant Park asked for Avery's name. Avery gave it, then repeated her title, District Attorney. Sergeant Park's face stayed controlled, but her tone sharpened in a different way, focused, procedural. She acknowledged Avery and shifted her attention back to Holloway. Sergeant Park asked for his body cam status and the call details. She asked whether he had a CAD entry. She asked what he observed before initiating contact. She asked whether he could articulate reasonable suspicion. Avery didn't add anything extra. She let the supervisor do the questioning. The sidewalk camera kept rolling, and right there the whole scene changed, from cop versus citizen to supervisor managing a liability in real time. Sergeant Lena Park stood at the driver window for a few seconds, just taking in what was on display. Patrol car angled behind a legally parked vehicle. An officer positioned like it was a stop. A bystander filming from the sidewalk. A calm driver asking basic legal questions. Park asked Avery for her name again, like she wanted it clearly stated on the record. Avery gave it. Then she restated her role. District Attorney for the county. That's when the scene tightened. Park didn't react loudly. She didn't need to. She shifted into damage control mode. Her questions turned sharper and more specific. Not emotional, procedural, focused. She asked Officer Holloway what his legal basis was for demanding ID from a person parked legally. Holloway tried to give a layered answer. He referenced the area. He referenced crime patterns. He referenced a description. He referenced welfare concerns. Park didn't accept the bundle. She separated each claim. She asked which claim happened first, what he observed before he approached, what exact facts made him believe Avery was involved in a specific crime, what report he was responding to, whether dispatch sent him to this vehicle or he chose it on his own. Holloway kept his answers general. Park kept her questions narrow. Avery stayed quiet while Park questioned him. When Avery spoke, she didn't argue feelings. She recited the sequence. Park behind her at an angle. Demand for ID. No crime stated. Multiple requests for clarification. Multiple attempts to get a yes or no on detention. Shifting reasons. Supervisor requested. Camera recording. Park asked Avery if she had been told she was free to leave. Avery said no. Park asked if Holloway told her she was being detained. Avery said no. Park asked if she had been accused of any specific offense. Avery said no. Park then asked Holloway in front of the bystander camera whether Avery was being detained. Holloway gave a reluctant answer. He tried to say it was a check. Park pushed again. Detained, yes or no? He finally said she wasn't detained. Park immediately told him to step back from the vehicle. And that's the moment everybody could see the shift. Not because of a dramatic speech, because the power moved. The supervisor took control of the scene. The officer lost the ability to keep freelancing. Avery asked Park for two things, clearly and calmly. Confirmation that she was free to leave. Confirmation that all recordings and logs would be preserved. Park said Avery was free to go. Avery didn't leave yet. She kept it professional and locked down the details. She asked Park to identify Holloway by name and badge number for the record. Park did. Avery repeated it back so the sidewalk recording captured it. Then Avery asked Park for the incident number, or CAD reference, for the contact. Park didn't have it on the spot. She said she'd generate it. Avery said she wanted it provided to her office that day. Not next week. Not whenever. Holloway stood off to the side, no longer talking at the window like he owned the moment. His tone had already changed once when Avery identified herself. It changed again under Park's control. He stopped giving commands. He stopped repeating the ID demand. He stopped trying to turn cooperation into a requirement. Avery addressed the biggest issue out loud, so the record didn't get rewritten later. She stated that the demand for ID came before any claim of a specific crime. She stated that the reasons changed multiple times. She stated that she was treated like a suspect without a stated basis. She stated the interaction needed review for policy and constitutional compliance. Park didn't argue with her. Park kept it in the lane of procedure. She said she'd handle it through the chain. Avery asked one more question that mattered. She asked whether Holloway's body camera had been activated before he approached the car. Park looked at Holloway and asked the same. Holloway said it was on. Avery said she wanted confirmation that it would be flagged for preservation and not overwritten. Park acknowledged that request. The bystander on the sidewalk didn't move closer, didn't interfere, just kept the phone up. That footage mattered because it showed the whole setup: the legal parking, the patrol car angle, the officer posture, the supervisor arrival, and the moment the stop dissolved after the legal authority got named. Avery then ended it clean. She said she'd be requesting dispatch logs, Bodycam, and any reports or notes tied to the encounter. She said her office would review it. She said she expected full cooperation. No threats, no flexing, just process. Then she left. Normal, legal, calm. And the reason this hit so hard wasn't that she was the district attorney. It was that nothing about her rights should have depended on that. By that evening, the sidewalk video wasn't just sitting on somebody's camera roll. Maya, the woman with the dog, posted it with a simple caption about a legal parking space, an ID demand, and the tone change after the title came out. She didn't edit it into a movie. She clipped it into short segments so people could see the sequence. Demand first, reasons later, supervisor arrival, then the sudden politeness. It spread fast because it was familiar. People recognized the pattern right away. The way an officer treated a calm person like a suspect without a stated crime. The way just checking turned into a pressure campaign. The way the whole thing softened only when status entered the chat. Within 24 hours, local accounts picked it up. Then community pages. Then a legal commentary channel stitched it with on-screen timestamps. And the simple question everyone asked, what was the reasonable suspicion? The department responded the way departments usually do at first. A short statement. Words like reviewing. Words like context. Nothing specific. No admission. No apology. That didn't last long because this time the person targeted wasn't stuck begging for records. Avery's office sent formal preservation requests the next morning. Bodycam, dispatch audio, CAD logs, any notes, any supervisor reports, any unit-to-unit radio traffic. She requested it as an official matter tied to an incident involving a deputy district attorney's office holder, which meant the internal handling had to be careful and documented. Internal Affairs opened a case, not a "we talked to him," a real file, case number, assigned investigator. And the department had another problem, the bystander video. Because if the body cam missed the start, the sidewalk video still showed the approach, the initial demand, and the lack of a stated crime. It also captured the supervisor asking for specific facts and the officer not giving clean answers. That outside angle made it harder to reshape later. Local reporters started calling. The city council got emails. The police chief's office got requests for the stop policy and ID procedures. Community groups asked why a legal parked car triggered enforcement energy at all. Then people came forward. Well, not to talk about Avery, to talk about Officer Holloway. A string of similar stories showed up in the comments and in inboxes. Same zone, same style. A cop who treated questioning the stop as a personal challenge. Stops that started with control and ended with a vague, "be careful," after wasting someone's time. Avery didn't hold a press conference. She didn't need to. She moved like a prosecutor. Quiet, documented, immediate. Her office requested a meeting with the police chief and city legal counsel. Not a photo op. A policy meeting. She asked for 3 things. 1, the full record of the incident, unedited, with preservation confirmation. 2, Officer Holloway's complaint history and any prior supervision notes. 3, a review of how patrol officers were trained on consensual encounters, detention standards, and ID demands. The department tried to keep it narrow. 1 misunderstanding. 1 contact. That didn't hold because the video showed shifting pretexts and an ID demand without a stated crime. It also showed the moment the rules seemed to change when the title came out. People didn't miss that. A few weeks later, the consequences started stacking. Officer Holloway got pulled off patrol pending investigation. Desk duty. No proactive stops. No field discretion without oversight. Internal Affairs interviewed the supervisor and reviewed the logs. They checked whether he created a CAD entry after the fact, whether he had any dispatch basis for the description claim, and whether policy required a reason before demanding ID. The department issued a training memo. It focused on reasonable, articulable suspicion, the limits of welfare checks, and how to handle consensual encounters without turning them into detentions. Not a vague memo. A reminder tied to real discipline risk. Then came the part officers hate most. Documentation that sticks. The department added the incident to their early warning tracking for repeat complaints. That meant every future complaint hit heavier. It also meant supervisors had to sign off on certain actions. More oversight, less freelancing. Avery also made sure the community understood the actual lesson, because the headline wasn't, DA gets harassed. The headline was, this is what happens to regular people when nobody important is sitting in that seat. So she did something strategic. She partnered with a local legal clinic and recorded a short rights education segment for the county site. Simple language, no legal flexing, just practical steps. Ask if you're being detained. Ask what crime is suspected. Keep your hands visible. Don't reach around the car. Record if it's legal in your state. Stay calm and repeat your question. Get names and badge numbers when you can. Ask for a supervisor if the encounter turns into pressure without explanation. She also emphasized a point people avoid. Filming isn't about winning. It's about accuracy. It stops the story from changing later. As for Holloway, the outcome didn't end with a dramatic firing announcement on TV. Real accountability usually looks less cinematic and more administrative. The investigation resulted in documented policy violations. The department imposed discipline. His ability to initiate discretionary contacts got restricted. His evaluations changed. Future promotions got complicated. His supervisors now had a paper trail that followed him. And the community got something rare. Proof on video of how quickly authority becomes negotiation when the person in the car has power back. Avery never celebrated it like a win. She treated it like a warning sign with a receipt. Because the point wasn't that she could defend herself. The point was that she shouldn't have needed a title for the law to apply. So, here's the question for you. If you were sitting in that car, calm, legal, and respectful, would you have known what to ask? Would you have recorded? Would you have stayed steady when the pressure started? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this with someone who needs it. And if you want more stories like this, realistic, modern, and focused on accountability, make sure you're subscribed because more are coming.
Hey, hold up a second. You live around here?
What's this about, officer?
Who's the kid with? That your child?
Yes. What's the reason you're asking?
All right, I need to see your ID.
There's no legal basis for that.
It's weird. You're out here with a stroller. Maybe the child is not yours.
If you have any questions about my child, say it plainly and tell me what facts you have.
This officer thought he was detaining just another civilian for a routine stop, but he had no idea he was actually interrogating a powerful federal judge. Watch as the tables turn the second the man with the stroller stops playing friendly and starts demanding the one thing that matters: articulable, reasonable suspicion. The officer tried to bluff his way through it. He couldn't. And by the time the truth came out, this wasn't a routine stop anymore. It was a public lesson in legal accountability that the officer couldn't talk his way out of. Where are you watching from? Country, state, city? Drop it in the comments. And if you like stories where people stay calm, know their rights, and make power answer for itself, hit like and subscribe. These situations don't change unless people understand what's allowed and what isn't. Now, rewind. It was a normal afternoon in a quiet neighborhood near a small park. Sidewalk traffic, parents, dog walkers. Nothing that screamed danger. The kind of place where people claim they want safety, but what they really mean is control over who looks like they belong. Julian Wells had left his home for a quick walk with his toddler in a stroller. He looked like what he was, a father doing a routine thing. No drama, no urgency. He moved at stroller pace, slow, predictable. A neighbor saw him and didn't see Dad. They saw a problem. They made a call, not about a crime, not about a specific act, just a label that's been used forever because it's vague enough to work. Suspicious person. Officer Trent Harlow responded like the label was proof. He pulled up fast, got out fast, and walked straight into Julian's path instead of approaching like this was a check-in. His posture did the talking. He wanted Julian stopped before he even knew what was being alleged. Harlow started with demands, identity, address, reason for being there. Then he stacked the questions that always show what the stop is really about. Where the child's mother was. Whether the child was his, why he didn't look familiar. The same old move. Make a normal situation sound abnormal, then treat confusion as guilt. Julian didn't escalate. He didn't perform. He didn't try to charm his way out either. He kept one hand on the stroller handle and kept his other hand visible. Calm face, calm voice. The kind of calm that doesn't read as fear, it reads as control. That calm annoyed Harlow. Because Harlow wanted compliance, immediate, automatic, grateful compliance. Julian gave him something else, structure. Julian asked a basic question that forces a cop to commit. Was this a consensual conversation or a detention? Was he free to keep walking or not? He didn't say it like a challenge. He said it like he needed clarity for the record. Harlow tried the middle lane, not calling it a detention, but also not letting Julian leave. That gray zone cops use when they don't have enough to stop you legally, but don't want to give up the stop. Julian didn't accept the gray zone. He asked what specific facts created reasonable suspicion. Not a vibe, not a call. Facts that could be written down and defended. He kept it tight. No speeches, just the legal threshold. Harlow's answer shifted. First it was a report, then it was recent incidents. Then it was, you match a description, without giving a description that meant anything. He kept moving the goalposts because he was fishing. Julian noticed every shift. This is where the power chess started. Julian signaled that he was documenting the interaction. He didn't wave the phone around. He didn't get theatrical. He just made it clear this encounter had a record now, and that the record would outlive whatever story the officer tried to build in the moment. Harlow's tone tightened again. His body angle changed. He stepped closer to the stroller like proximity itself was a tool. He kept talking like Julian owed him answers just because he was wearing a uniform, but Julian stayed in one lane, legality. He asked for the officer's name and badge number. He asked whether Harlow was ordering him to provide ID or requesting it. He kept forcing the officer to choose words carefully. That's what people don't realize. A stop lives and dies on language. When an officer gets sloppy, the whole thing collapses later. Harlow got sloppy. He treated Julian like refusing to chat was the same as doing something wrong. He implied that Julian was making it harder than it needed to be. That line always shows up when the officer doesn't have enough. It's pressure, not law. Julian didn't argue feelings. He didn't debate respect. He went straight back to the standard. What crime did the officer suspect? And what facts supported that suspicion? On the sidewalk, a couple people started paying attention. Not a crowd, just enough. A jogger slowed down. Someone across the street lifted a phone, not hiding it. That matters. Officers act different when they know the public can replay their choices. Harlow noticed the attention and tried to lock the scene down. He shifted from questions to instructions. He wanted Julian to stay put. He wanted control back. And that's when Julian made the quiet pivot that changed everything. He stopped engaging like a regular person trying to get through it. He started engaging like someone who'd spent years watching unlawful stops get justified after the fact. He called out the exact legal problem in real time. No clear reasonable suspicion, no lawful basis to prolong, no authority to treat a father with a stroller like a suspect because a stranger felt uncomfortable. Harlow still didn't know who Julian was. He just knew he wasn't getting the easy win. And the longer he stayed there without a solid reason, the worse it got for him. Officer Trent Harlow realized fast that Julian wasn't going to talk himself into trouble. No rambling, no nervous explanations, no apologizing for being outside. Julian kept the stroller still, kept his hands visible, and kept steering the interaction back to one issue: whether the officer had a legal reason to stop him. Harlow responded the way a lot of officers respond when they don't like that kind of calm. He tried to make the stop feel unavoidable. He said he was responding to a suspicious person call and treated that label like it automatically gave him authority. He didn't describe a crime. He didn't describe a specific action. He just kept leaning on the fact that someone called. Then he pushed for ID again. He didn't ask like it was optional. He asked like refusal would become the reason for the stop. Julian didn't hand anything over. He asked a clarifying question through the narrator's reporting, whether this was a voluntary contact or an actual detention. He needed the officer to pick one. Harlow tried to stay in the gray area. He kept Julian in place while refusing to say exactly what Julian was suspected of doing. That gray area is where a lot of bad stops live. If the person stays, the officer claims cooperation. If the person leaves, the officer claims flight. Either way, the officer keeps control. Julian didn't let the officer have that. Harlow changed angles and focused on the stroller. He looked down at the toddler, then back at Julian, and started asking questions about the child. Who the child was, where the child's mother was, whether Julian could prove he was the father. He framed it like concern, but it landed like suspicion. The questions weren't about safety. They were about forcing Julian to justify his family on a sidewalk. Julian kept his voice even. He didn't get loud. He didn't insult the officer. He asked for the legal basis again, this time tied directly to the new line of questioning. If the officer was suggesting something involving the child, he needed to state what he suspected and what facts supported it. Harlow couldn't support it, so he started cycling through new reasons. He referenced vague neighborhood complaints. He mentioned recent incidents without naming one. He hinted at kidnapping without saying it plainly. He suggested trespassing even though Julian was on a public sidewalk. Each explanation wasn't building into a coherent story. They replaced each other, depending on what sounded most serious in the moment. A jogger slowed down on the opposite side of the street. Someone on a porch stopped and watched. Another person raised a phone and recorded openly. Harlow noticed. His eyes kept flicking toward the cameras. His tone tightened. He tried to take control of the physical space. He stepped closer than he needed to. He angled his body so Julian had less room to move the stroller forward. He asked Julian to step away from the stroller for safety. That request wasn't neutral. If Julian stepped away, Harlow controlled the child's space and could reshape the scene however he wanted. If Julian refused, Harlow could label it non-compliance. Julian didn't step away. He stayed beside the stroller and kept his posture neutral. He made sure his hands stayed visible. He didn't give Harlow a reason to claim fear. He also didn't give Harlow control over the stroller. Harlow pressed again for ID and started narrating Julian's behavior like he was writing a report out loud. He described Julian as uncooperative. He implied Julian was causing the situation. That's another tactic. If the officer says it on scene, he hopes the person reacts and gives him something on camera that can be used later. Julian didn't react. He asked for the officer's name and badge number. He asked for a supervisor. He made it clear he would not consent to searches and would not answer investigative questions without a lawful basis for detention. He kept it procedural and calm, the way someone talks when they expect oversight. Harlow tried a pressure move that went beyond the stop. He implied that refusing to cooperate could lead to bigger problems. He hinted at taking Julian in to sort it out. He hinted at involving child services. He didn't state a charge. He didn't give a clear legal reason. He just tried to scare compliance out of Julian. That was when the bias showed itself more clearly. Harlow talked about the neighborhood like Julian didn't belong in it. He treated Julian's presence as suspicious by default, not because of anything Julian did, but because Julian didn't match the officer's mental picture of who belongs in that area. The stop stopped being about a call. It became about assumptions. Julian didn't turn it into a street argument about race. He treated it like a legal problem with a paper trail. He asked again for the specific facts that created reasonable suspicion. He repeated the supervisor request. He indicated that the encounter was being recorded and that he wanted the incident documented by name and badge number, not left as an informal stop that disappears. Harlow radioed for a supervisor. While they waited, the tension stayed in the air. Harlow kept his stance squared up like he couldn't afford to look wrong in front of the people watching. Julian stayed with the stroller, calm and still, like he understood that the safest move was to keep everything boring, visible, and recorded. And Julian made a choice that was going to change the rest of the interaction. He didn't announce it. He didn't posture. He reached for something in a controlled way, explained what he was doing before he did it, and prepared to show documentation that would force the conversation out of Harlow's emotions and into a world Harlow couldn't bluff his way through. The supervisor was still a few minutes out, and Officer Harlow was trying to hold the scene together long enough to look like he had control. He kept Julian in place without clearly saying he was detained. He kept asking questions that had nothing to do with a specific crime. He kept scanning around at the people watching and recording. Julian didn't let the officer's mood set the pace. He stayed beside the stroller. He moved carefully. He explained his movements before making them, because he wasn't giving Harlow any excuse to claim fear. He reached into his jacket pocket slowly and pulled out a wallet. He didn't flash anything like he was trying to win a flex contest. He held it in a way that made it easy for the officer's body camera to capture. He gave Harlow the minimum needed to understand what was happening. It was official federal judiciary identification. Harlow's face changed immediately. His voice lowered, his shoulders dropped, his eyes went back to the credential more than once, like his brain was reloading the whole situation. A second ago, he had been treating Julian like a problem to manage. Now he was standing in front of someone who could turn this sidewalk stop into a documented legal issue that wouldn't stay inside the department. Harlow tried to recover fast. He shifted into politeness. He started acting like this had been a simple misunderstanding and he was ready to clear it up. He tried to move the moment along like the last several minutes hadn't happened. He tried to reframe himself as cautious, professional, doing his job. Julian didn't accept that rewrite. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten the officer. He did something that hit harder than emotion. He explained exactly why the stop was unlawful and why the officer's apology wouldn't fix the damage. He pointed out the basic issue. Harlow had treated a vague call as enough to stop a person. Then, when questioned, he kept changing the suspected offense instead of stating one clear reason supported by facts. He also tried to escalate through intimidation and control instead of legal justification. And he aimed suspicion at Julian's parenting without any evidence. A child was involved, and that made the officer's choices more serious, not less. Harlow tried to interrupt. He tried to say he had to respond to calls. He tried to make it about procedure and safety. Julian kept it tight and direct. Responding to a call didn't mean detaining someone without reasonable suspicion. Feeling uncertain didn't create lawful authority. If Harlow couldn't articulate a specific crime and specific facts, the stop should have ended early. Instead, he prolonged it and pushed it into something it never needed to become. Then the supervisor arrived. Sergeant Alvarez pulled up, stepped out, and read the scene in about 2 seconds. Stroller, dad. Officer squared up, bystanders filming. That alone told her this was already a problem. Then she looked at Julian and caught the name. She didn't overreact. She didn't put on a show. Her posture shifted just slightly, the way people do when they realize they're standing in front of someone with real institutional power. She spoke with controlled professionalism and asked what happened. Harlow started talking immediately. He tried to get his version in first. He framed it like a routine check based on a call and implied Julian had been difficult. Alvarez didn't ignore him, but she didn't let him dominate. She asked one question that matters in every stop review. What facts created reasonable suspicion? Harlow gave the same vague answers he had been giving on the sidewalk. Call, concerns, recent issues, matching description, nothing clean, nothing concrete. Julian stayed calm and made the timeline simple for the supervisor. The stop started with a vague label. It grew into an ID demand without a stated offense. Then it shifted into questions about the child without evidence. Then it included threats and pressure to comply. Then it only cooled down after Harlow saw federal credentials. Alvarez understood what that meant. Even if she wanted to protect her officer, she couldn't protect that sequence if there was body camera footage and public video. Harlow tried the quick exit. He aimed for the easiest resolution. Let Julian go, apologize, and end it before it became a formal complaint. He tried to make it sound like everyone could just move on. Julian didn't let it stay informal. He told the supervisor he wanted the incident documented. He wanted the incident number. He wanted confirmation that body camera footage would be retained. He wanted the names and badge numbers recorded in writing. He also wanted a clear explanation of how suspicious person calls were being used in that neighborhood, because this stop followed a pattern that wasn't about safety. It was about who looked acceptable on a sidewalk. Alvarez tried to keep it calm and contained. She offered to talk off to the side. Julian stayed where the cameras could see. That wasn't for drama. That was for accountability. Private conversations disappear. Public records don't. Alvarez gave Julian the incident information and confirmed she would initiate review. She also directed Harlow to step back. That instruction wasn't loud, but it was firm. Harlow obeyed it instantly. A minute ago, he had been demanding compliance from Julian. Now he was taking commands and trying not to be seen as the reason this was about to blow up. Julian didn't gloat. He didn't embarrass him for sport. He made the point clearly because that was the real lesson of the moment. Authority without legal basis turns into harassment fast, and the public shouldn't need a federal title to be treated lawfully. Julian then ended the sidewalk part of it the same way he started it. Calm, controlled. He made sure the supervisor had what she needed to document the stop. He ensured the stroller was never out of his reach. Then he continued his walk, not because the officer allowed it, but because the detention had no lawful foundation to begin with. The video spread that same night. 2 angles. Calm father with a stroller asking for the legal basis. Officer escalating without stating a clear crime. By morning, complaints hit the department. Civil rights groups asked for body cam footage, and reporters started calling. Then Julian's name got confirmed. People realized the random dad was a federal judge. That changed the whole conversation. If this happened to him, it was happening to everyone else who didn't have status. Internal affairs moved fast. They pulled dispatch logs, CAD notes, body cam, and witness video. The review focused on basics. No clear, reasonable suspicion, shifting explanations, prolonged stop, and questioning the child's parentage without evidence. Officer Harlow got taken off patrol during the investigation. The department later sustained policy violations and disciplined him, with a serious suspension and mandatory retraining, plus a formal warning tied to escalation during a stop involving a child. They also reviewed whether he had a pattern of similar stops. Julian didn't accept a quiet apology. He pushed for changes. Clearer rules for suspicious person calls, required documentation of reasonable suspicion for pedestrian stops, stronger supervisor review, and body cam retention that couldn't be quietly trimmed. The bigger point stuck with the community. Constitutional rights shouldn't work only when the person stopped has a title. People started recording more, requesting supervisors more, and pushing the city to track stops and publish the data. So what would you have done in his place? Stay procedural or try to talk your way out? Comment your take, share this with someone who needs it, and subscribe for more stories where calm beats control and accountability actually lands.